John had always believed that marriage was a bond forged in trust, respect, and love. He had been married to Grace for nearly 12 years, and over that time, their life together had been everything he had ever dreamed of. They had built a home, shared countless memories, and grown old together in the kind of way that people whispered about, how it was possible for two people to live in perfect harmony. At least, that's what John thought. They had met in college, both eager to conquer the world and find their place in it. Grace had been stunning, with her long dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and an infectious laugh that always made John feel like he was the luckiest man alive. When they married, everything fell into place. She was his perfect partner, the one who supported him through thick and thin. But, as time went on, things began to shift. John wasn't blind to the small changes in their relationship. The late nights when Grace worked, the distant stares during their conversations, and her increasing desire for alone time, all things he had brushed aside as a sign of the busyness that life had thrown at them. After all, they both had successful careers, and balancing marriage and work was challenging. Yet, he never suspected a thing. How could he? They were married, and despite the occasional bump in the road, he was sure they were fine, or so he thought. Chapter 2: The First Suspicion. It was a Wednesday evening when the first crack in their relationship appeared. John had come home from work earlier than usual, a rare occurrence in his demanding career. He walked into their home, expecting the familiar sounds of Grace's laughter as she prepared dinner in the kitchen. But instead, he was met with an empty house. The lights were dim, and the smell of the dinner she had promised to cook had already faded. He checked the clock. It was almost 7 p.m. Grace always came home by 6:30. Frowning, he pulled out his phone to call her, but she didn't pick up. Odd, he thought. Grace was never one to ignore his calls. Trying to push away the small pang of unease growing in his chest, he decided to wait. Another hour passed, and still no word from Grace. When she finally walked in, it was almost 8:30. She looked flustered, her hair slightly out of place, and her makeup more smeared than usual. "Where have you been?" John asked, trying to mask the worry in his voice. I had to stay late at work," Grace said, her voice tight. "You know how it is. Things just piled up." John nodded, but the feeling in the pit of his stomach wouldn't go away. Something wasn't right. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way she avoided his gaze or how she seemed almost too defensive. The suspicion lingered like a shadow. Chapter 3: The Discovery. The weeks following that evening were filled with moments of doubt and confusion for John. Grace continued to be distant, often staying late at work, but when she was home, her attention was elsewhere. She would be on her phone more than usual, her eyes darting away every time John caught her texting. One night, after a particularly silent dinner, John decided to do something he never thought he'd have to do. He grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter when she wasn't looking. With shaky hands, he unlocked it using the code they had shared for years. What he found made his blood run cold. The messages weren't blatant at first, but then he saw the name Mark. Mark was someone Grace had met at work, a colleague. She had mentioned him a few times in passing. He had always assumed they were just friends, but the messages were anything but platonic. Grace had sent Mark flirtatious messages about how she couldn't wait to see him again, about how she missed him, and how she was thinking of him in ways she shouldn't. John's heart sank as he scrolled through the conversation. His breath came in shallow gasps as the realization hit him like a freight train. His wife was having an affair. The trust they had built was shattered in a matter of seconds. His hands were shaking now, and the phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the floor. He stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, his mind racing. How long had this been going on? Was he so blind to their marriage that he couldn't see it? Before he could process what to do next, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Grace. "What are you doing with my phone?" Her voice was a sharp contrast to the softness he had always known. It sent a chill down his spine. John turned around, his face pale, eyes wide with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up the phone. "What is this, Grace? Who is Mark?" Chapter 4: The Confrontation. Grace's face went pale. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. John could see her mind scrambling for an explanation, for something that would make this all go away. But he was done. The moment of doubt he had felt so many times before had turned into undeniable truth. "John, please, let me explain," Grace said, her voice trembling. "There's nothing to explain," John snapped, his voice breaking. "You've been lying to me. You've been seeing someone else behind my back, and you didn't think I would find out." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes, but John didn't care. His heart was breaking too fast for him to care about her tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Grace whispered, her voice strained. "It's not what you think. It just happened. John, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" John repeated bitterly, his voice cracking with emotion. "You think sorry is enough? You think that makes everything okay? You betrayed me, Grace. You broke my trust, and now I don't know who you are anymore." Grace stepped toward him, reaching out for him, but John recoiled. He had never felt so far from her in his life. "Please," she begged, her voice desperate. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. I swear. We can work through it." John shook his head, his chest tight with pain. "No, Grace. This is over. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't respect our marriage. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Chapter 5: The Aftermath. The days following the confrontation were filled with silence. Grace moved out of the house, taking only the essentials, while John was left to navigate the devastation of the life he thought he had built. The house that had once felt like a home now felt like a prison. Every corner reminded him of the life he had lost, of the woman who had once been his partner, but was now a stranger. John filed for divorce shortly after. The process was long and painful. He had to sit in courtrooms, sign papers, and relive every hurtful moment as Grace fought to make herself appear the victim. But John knew the truth. He knew the betrayal was too deep to ever repair.